Okay, guys, I want to show you guys a game today. This is played in the Zurich tournament of 1953. It's a candidates tournament to determine who's going to be facing Botvinnik for the world title. This is 1953, and Smyslov actually won this tournament. He won this tournament with 18 points, 2 whole points ahead of David Bronstein. And Bronstein wrote this book, and let me go ahead and read off the players just so you can know how strong it is. We have Smyslov, Bronstein, Karas, Reshevsky, Petrosian, Geller, Najdorf, Kotov, Taimanov, Averbakh, Boleslavsky, Szabo, Gligerich, Juve, and Stahlberg. So clearly this is a very strong tournament, and this is the first game of the tournament. And now in this game, this is a very instructive game. It's even grandmasters have a hard time understanding dark square weaknesses. Now, Bronstein said that he had a hard time. Took him a very, very long time to figure out what a dark square weakness really was, because you have to use the dark squares to attack the opponent's pieces on the light squares. Now, Bronstein thought that before he figured out what it really meant, he figured out that if a dark square weakness means that you don't have a dark squared bishop and your pawns will be on the light squares. But this is a very instructive game. And it's also an instructive game from a psychological point of view, because at one point, Szabo is better in a winning position, and then it's a drawn position, and then he refuses a draw, simply because of the fact that he was winning before, and he ends up losing the game. But let's go ahead and show you guys the game. Szabo was playing as white, and Efim Geller, who needs no introduction. He was the second to Boris Spassky in the 1972 chess championship, and he's playing as black. And so, let's go ahead and show this game. Starts out with c4. We have knight to f6, g3, e6, bishop g2, d5, d4. This is the Catalan opening. We have d takes c4, queen a4 check, going for the c4 pawn. We have knight b to d7, knight to f3, a6, preparing b5, but queen captures on c4 and b5. Now, what Szabo's plan was is he's going to try and create a dark square weakness in Efim Geller's camp. And what he does is he's going to lock these pawns on light squares, and he's going to exchange his bishop on c1 for the dark square bishop of Efim Geller's on f8. And how he does this is a very brilliant way. He plays queen c6. And we have rook b8. He was attacking the rook on a8. We have bishop to f4, attacking this pawn on c7. And Geller defends it with knight d5. We have bishop g5. Now, you really don't want to play f6 because queen captures on e6 would be a very good position, and he didn't want to repeat any moves by playing the knight back. So this is how he exchanges the dark squared bishops. We have bishop e7, bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and Szabo castles. We have bishop b7, kicking away the queen, queen c2, we have c5. We have d takes c5, knight takes c5, and rook c1. We have rook c8, knight to c3, knight to f6, and already Bronstein criticizes him because instead of playing this knight to f6, he should have played knight to b6. But either way, he plays knight to f6. We have b4, kicking away this knight and locking these pawns on light squares, going ahead with this plan. We have knight a4. He was attacking this pinned knight twice, so he moves the knight here. We have knight takes c3, rook takes c3, rook takes c3, and queen takes c3, and Geller castles. We have rook c1, rook d8, and you'd think that he would be able to play rook c8, but he actually can't, because simply capturing the knight, or capturing the rook on c8 would be winning for um, Szabo. Because after the bishop takes, rook takes c8, he'd block with the knight, we have knight e5. Now we have g6, just to show, and now he's coming to c6, and it's unstoppable. Geller would not be able to stop this rook from coming. And after he captures, he's threatening all sorts of discoveries. Oh, sorry. He's threatening all sorts of discoveries, and then this f7 pawn will fall. So it's basically winning. We have, so we place rook d8 instead. We have a3, knight d5, attacking the queen, then queen to d4, f6, not allowing this knight to come to e5 or g5. We have knight e1, going ahead with his plan to get his knight to c5, because if Szabo can get his knight to c5, he's basically winning the game, because the position would just be clearly better. So he plays e5, and this is the critical moment of the game, which Bronstein really, really likes. He plays queen c5, and Efim Geller immediately exchanges queens. But one should always consider a move like queen a7. Now, in the book, Bronstein actually says that the queen cannot be smoked out. But let's show why. If he was to play rook a8, trying to get the queen to go away from the strong diagonal, he would capture the bishop, or capture the knight on d5. We have bishop takes c5, and he would lose the queen. But if he plays rook d7, it's still a blunder just the same. He would capture the bishop on b7, and if you can't really capture the queen, because if he would take on d5 with check, king has to move, rook c8 check, the king has nowhere to go, so he'd have to block, he would take, and then he would have to take the rook, and then he would take the rook on b7. And being up 2 pieces, this is basically winning for Szabo. So instead of, queen to a7 doesn't really win the game, so you have to try and find a move. Well, what if you played king to f8 instead? He would get knight to d3, because if he wastes a move to play king f8, then Szabo has time to get his knight to c5. So if he plays rook a8 now, trying to kick away the queen, then queen c5 would be a very good move, because Geller cannot trade queens, because if queen takes c5, knight takes c5, the bishop is threatened, and this knight here. So Geller would either be losing a piece or the exchange, because he would have to stop this knight from coming to c5, or he would have to block this knight from by pinning it. That way he would be able to capture on c1, but he would get bishop takes d5. After bishop takes d5, knight d7 check, king e8, rook takes c8, king takes d7, and rook h8. And being up the exchange, this is completely winning for Szabo. So after queen c5, so instead he plays queen c5, and Geller immediately exchanges queens. Now he plays b takes c5. Now this is basically the losing move. The only move that he had to keep equality, or not equality, but an advantage for white is to play rook takes on c5. But he plays b takes c5 because he figured that the threat of coming up the board with the pawn would be winning. But Geller stops this pretty easily. He plays bishop c6, blocking the pawn, rook d1, rook d7, bishop h3, and maybe if Geller played a silly move like blocking, then he could play bishop check, picking up the knight. But Geller doesn't fall for this. He plays rook e7, and then knight c2, a5, bishop d2, knight d7, bishop h3, rook e7, So he's basically offering a draw with the repetition of moves here. But Szabo refuses because he wanted to win the game because he was winning before. So we have King F1, which is not really a good move because it allows for the king to just improve the position. So we have King F7. Now the king is guarding the E6 square. Now it allows Geller to bring his rook to C7, attacking the pawn, and it's undefendable. So we have King E1, Rook C7. Now this C5 pawn is completely undefendable. So we have Rook D3, Bishop B7, Rook, Knight E3, Rook takes C5, grabbing back the pawn, Knight E5, Knight F5, Bishop C6, Knight D6 check, King to F8, Bishop G2, G6, King to D2, King E7, kicking away the knight, King E or Knight E4, Rook C4, F3, F5, kicking away the knight even further, Knight to F2, Rook A4, Knight to D1, E4, F takes E4, F takes E4. Now Rook B3 because the rook had to move. We have Rook to D4 check, King to C1, B4. Now the idea is to create a passed pawn on the queen side and push it to victory. So we have Knight E3, Knight to C3, A takes B4, Knight E2 check. So the king has to move to B1. We have Bishop A4 attacking the rook, Rook B2, Knight C3 check, King C1, A takes B4. Now Geller has created his passed pawn. We have Rook D2, Rook takes D2, King takes D2. Now he just improves the position of his own king, and this is winning. So we have Knight G4, King C5, H4, King D4, H5, G takes H5, Knight to E3, Knight to B1 check, King to E2, and Bishop E5 check, King to F2, and B3. Now this pawn is unstoppable, and in this position, Laszlo Szabo resigned the game. So this is just a good game to show dark square weaknesses. Now, it's a very instructive game. I thought you guys would like that. And it's also a psychological kind of game because at one point Szabo was better, and then there was a draw offer, and then he didn't take the draw, but simply because of the fact that he was winning before. So, it just goes to show you guys you need to study dark square weaknesses as well as I do. But I hope you guys enjoyed the game, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.